We're joined today by Craig Lusher, the product manager for Continent 8, specifically within the environment now where we're seeing so many cyber attacks on casino operators. It's really interesting to question what are the main takeaways, for example, from this most recent one that we've seen at Caesars and MGM.
Well, security measures must continually evolve and adapt in changing environments. And the human element remains the weakest link, both in cyber and physical security. Complacency and failure to educate employees on cyber awareness are significant factors in both attacks, really.
But I mean, what can we try and take away from that? Should we be evolving in terms of implementing more cybersecurity? Should we be giving in to some of these cyber attacks and paying out the ransom? What should be the evolutionary strategy going forward?
Sure. So with everything, education is key. So the human element is the most vulnerable part of any security strategy. So ensuring education is the number one. In terms of paying ransoms and things like that, law enforcement and the general rule is you don't pay ransoms. However, payment can be justified if failing to do so, will release sensitive information or employee data. You need to protect those people. So the decision to pay a ransom should be on a case-by-case basis and consider the potential kind of legal repercussions as well as the organization's preparedness for data and system recovery.
Now, we're going to run back to that in just a second, but I just want to look at kind of the difference between online and land-based. Who are actually more vulnerable, the online gaming operators or the land-based gaming operators?
Well, land-based operators are more vulnerable due to that human factor, I suppose, especially when targeted by phishing campaigns and ransomware. Online casinos can be taken offline quickly if they're not adequately protected, particularly from DDoS attacks, phishing and ransomware again. But both types of operators do have similar vulnerabilities, and I suppose there's less effort required to take off an offline and online company than there would be to take offline a land-based operator. So I suppose the question really comes down to what's less effort, and there's less effort against the online casinos.
But looking at cybersecurity in general, obviously there have been changes in the way that the hackers in particular are working. So how has cybersecurity had to change within the recent years to try and keep up with what they're now doing?
Sure. So threat actors have become more organized, sophisticated, and ruthless in their attacks. Over lockdowns and the pandemic, there was lots of attacks took place. Lots of money was made, and in fact, they kind of reinvested this money into their own infrastructure and tools, and that kind of has helped them break in and attack faster than ever before. So in 2018, I think it took around 10 hours for a cyber attacker to get into the systems and kind of move within those systems. Nowadays, we're looking at under 1.5 hours to do the same sort of job. So it's really the pandemic really provided more opportunities to exploit the changes in work patterns and things like that. So obviously, the adoption of AI and machine learning by the hacking community has also increased, allowing more efficient and objective attacks. So AI is very good at doing things objectively, and cybersecurity is something that it's either protected or it's not. The exploit's either there or it's not. So it's very easy for these tools to go in and start probing and finding vulnerabilities.
I mean, you mentioned how the amount of time in which people can then hack into your system has gone down quite a bit, but how about the detection time? What exactly are we looking at in terms of the detection time once you've identified a threat? Or how long can it take to identify a potential threat to your system?
Sure. So, infiltration can take anywhere from weeks to a year, right? So you could get into the system, they may have a handhold in there and kind of slowly kind of prise open the doors over a period of time. Once in, they might put backup entries in and things like that. So it can take a long time for these things to be put in place. All the while, it's undetected by the security teams. So, it can take on average about a year since initial kind of initial attack and initial hack into your system between them being detected by the InfoSec teams. There are also specialist hackers known as access brokers that will identify these vulnerabilities and ensure the access is there and backed up by access as well before selling that access onto other organizations that can then kind of do the ransom or do the hack or do the kind of next stage of that attack. Remediation time. So, if an attack takes place and maybe there's ransomware or something like that, if InfoSec teams are prepared, it can take on average about 7 days to kind of pull all that data back in. If they're not prepared, that it's a piece of string, and 6 months down the line, they could still be feeling effects of that attack.
I mean, just to touch back on the recent scenario that we saw with MGM, would you say that kind of response time enabled to fix the issue was industry standard?
I mean, it's a tricky one to comment on that precise scenario. I mean, it can take anywhere between a week and 6 months. So if they do things within a week, great. If it takes longer than that, it's still not unknown. So it's hard to pin down.
So I mean, basic takeaway from this is that if you get hacked, it's going to be bad.
Yes,
I'm really curious about the type of data that the hackers are actually trying to scrape from the gaming operators in particular. What do you have any insights on that?
Sure. So, I mean, casinos and gaming industry, it's all a high cash industry, right? So there's bank accounts not bank accounts, there's wallets that are sitting there as good as bank accounts, trying to steal account information and banking information specifically from customers and wallets and things, but also they can be looking to steal software code for the games as well that can be targeted, so they can find vulnerabilities within that as well. The ultimate goal is financial gain, right? So they're looking to go through this, whether it's ransomwares or account disclosures and things like that. And they're looking to make money from this. There are some, obviously, Activision type scenarios where people are against the gaming industry, as we saw, with Icebreaker and things like that. But again, other companies and corporate espionage, that still is ongoing as well within this industry.
Now, within the corporate espionage, vein, let's say, would that be the competitors, or would that be?
It can be competitors. But also it can be groups that are against gaming casinos and things like that as well. So or just want the prestige of being able to take down a big name. So it's all of the above factors really. So yeah, there's a lot goes into it. But obviously the ones we've got to be, all of it we've got to be concerned with. But the guys that are out there trying to make money off this is, we don't want that to happen.
Yeah. Speaking in terms of how to mitigate that threat, how much should these gaming companies be spending on cybersecurity? Like, for example, what percentage of their budget should be allocated to that? Obviously, it's becoming more and more important, but how much of their budget should be allocated specifically to that area?
Sure. So the value is a tricky one because obviously, the value of the data being protected should be the primary consideration for budget allocation, right? So the sensitive information should be protected as much as possible, and then perhaps you've got different levels depending on the sensitivity of the information. So basic security measures should be in place before investing in more complex solutions as well. So this includes staff training, web application API protection, EDR, denial of service protection, things like that. So that's kind of the low-hanging fruit, let's say, and then more complex solutions should be put in place for more complex sensitive data. So I suppose to answer your question, most organizations should allocate, I guess, between 10 and 15% of their annual budget for security defenses and the education, which is kind of one of the key points here.
It seems like, that is the sticking point within a lot of the most recent hacks that we've seen. It comes down to the individual vulnerability. So I want to jump into AI. We've seen a lot of how AI has been able to create deep fakes and, intricately craft emails which seem like they're coming from your superior and stuff like that. So, I mean, how is AI kind of factored into now the cybersecurity defense system? You know, is it working more in favor of those who are attempting to conduct hacks, or is it working more in the favor of those who are trying to prevent them?
Well, the rise of advanced technologies like ChatGPT and deepfakes it's really blurred the lines between reality and AI generated content. So, a few years down the line, that's going to become even more evident. And, the real world and the artificial world is going to become very blurred. It's going to be very hard to protect against that. It is something we've got to look out for, and it is a new sort of, phishing's always been there. It's always been an email that comes in trying to get you to do something. Sometimes it's obvious, sometimes it's not. They've become, more eloquent in recent years. But with deep fakes and things like that, and somebody phoning you up and you know their voice and is asking you to do something, especially in a personalized authority, it could be in your chain of command or your CEO or something. We're going to see a lot more of that sort of thing happening due to all the information that's out there, personal information that's out there on the web. You can start to relate to things, and it's going to be hard to really work out what's real and what's not. I guess two-factor authentication and verification may become more widespread. Authenticate video and audio calls and videos, I suppose.
Is that technology currently, being used out there? Is it already in the works? Is it widespread?
Yeah, in terms of the actual deep fakes and things like that, using that in a cyber attacks, I guess, Chatty Goblin is an attack that happened at various casinos in the Philippines and Southeast Asia. They used kind of that social engineering on their customer support desks to try and get them to open a payload, which would then allow them access into their systems. And that was successful. So I suppose, AI generated content is happening at the moment in the cyber security space. Can we protect against it? Well, we can. Two-factor is kind of the main, or multi-factor is kind of the main way to go. It could result in you and I having this conversation over video and passing each other a password or something similar that we can verify against. And going back to that kind of route, I suppose.
It sounds almost like we're going into the spy years, the Cold War. What's the password? A lot of these operators are currently also operating kind of on a little bit more antiquated systems. So I'm wondering, I've heard that Continent 8 is coming in, they're trying to help them improve their overall cybersecurity without having to completely change their system in general. Can you explain a little bit about that to me?
Sure. So, without total systems revamp, C8 can help not only from cybersecurity, security posture standpoint, but also application development and network architecture. So, as I mentioned earlier, protecting low-hanging fruit is key here. So, we offer intrusion detection and prevention services and vulnerability and penetration tests to assess kind of a company's security posture. And this also helps you comply with regulation in some jurisdictions as well. But we can also provide managed endpoint detection solutions to protect laptops and servers. DDoS protection protects kind of the network. It keeps businesses and websites online and alive during a DDoS attack. And then we've got the web application and API protection, which is kind of one of the most attacked vectors at the moment, actually. So we see a kind of 300% year-on-year rise with these sorts of attacks. Trying to exploit vulnerable websites. And what we could do with that is we put a proxy in front of your website. So any kind of antiquated or legacy components that may be running on your website just kind of have that standard fail of protection from that web service. So this also means that developers can kind of bring in new features and functions quicker to the market because that's kind of standardized security is there. And also it's one of the easiest things to protect against. So there's kind of a correlation between how hard something is to protect against and the cost, obviously. But also the simpler something is, the more likely it is to be attacked as well. So, that low-hanging fruit, it's good to get that base protection in, just to ensure that the easy targets for attackers aren't taken advantage of.
Now, this is going to sound like a completely, let's say, ridiculous question, but obviously, as technology evolves, as there are more people who are able to have access to these type of tools, which can even be sold online, do you predict that the frequency of these type of attacks on major gaming institutions is going to increase?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, as I said before, the cash wallet stored within these systems is kind of access to money if they break in, right? They can transfer that out. There's restrictions in place, but it's something that's very attractive. Also, being that the industry that we're in is very fast flowing, fast changing. Everybody's trying to get like a unique selling point amongst the competitors. New features are being released quickly. Sometimes they may not have they might have exploits in there that are, or vulnerabilities in there that are waiting to be exploited. So as things are constantly changing, the risk of attack constantly changes as well. So what might be adequate protection one day, a year down the line, systems have changed, everything's moved on. That same protection might not stand anymore. So it's a constantly evolving thing, and you've got to. Cybersecurity is not only about paying attention to what you are protecting and the tools that you're putting into place to protect. It's also about accepting the risks and trying to evaluate that as a constant moving target.
So, I mean, how far up the totem pole are gaming operators in terms of those who are going to be primarily attacked?
Yeah, so they're right up there, definitely. So anything with money in mind. So these attackers see gaming companies and casinos having a lot of money, being able to pay the ransoms. They see, the cash wallet sitting there, being able to be cash to be taken out of there. And also, it's not just the cash wallets, it's also the reward systems, as we've seen. And anything that's kind of related to that kind of anything that they can use in that case. So it's a very attractive target for attackers.
Well, there's going to be more and more threats which are increasing worldwide, unfortunately, but it seems like that, companies like Continent 8 are out there who are able to be helping companies to, shroud themselves a little bit from it and, when necessary, move on with the consequences. Thank you very much for your time. Yet again, Craig Lusher, the product manager for Continent 8.
Thank you.